Thanks everyone for joining us. Everybody give a quick wave when I get to your name, and I'll whip round quickly. Gav Shaw, the Executive Creative Director at McCann in Leeds, Coral Cranmer, our Head of Strategy and Planning, and the special guest for today, former hospital radio DJ, Pete Markey. We'll come back to that in a minute, I think. And look, like all of these sessions, this is built around not only Pete as a leader in our space, but also on the basis of a piece he wrote for us very kindly on the theme of creative courage. And I am Toby Southgate. I'm the Chief Growth Officer and Integration Lead for McCann World Group globally. We're all here, and I will come back to radio DJ Pete Markey in a second, but and we hope it's why you're here too, because we all believe really in the power of creativity to make change. Creativity is fuel for optimism and prosperity, and all kinds of good and hopeful things that I think we all need a little bit of a reminder of in our lives at the moment. And that's why McCann Leeds launched Creative Courage over a year ago now, November of 2019, with an actual physical event, which might seem like a blast from the really dark ages. But sadly, of course, we've evolved, and this platform now, so 5 or 6 events in, has moved online. One day we will be back in person, I'm certain of it. But what we've built along the way is really a content series where leaders in marketing and creativity, people like Pete, can come and share their own views on what creative courage is and on the impact that way of thinking, that approach has had on their lives and their careers. And it's brilliant for us for a couple of reasons. For McCann World Group, it sort of parallels our own approach to creativity, which is a mantra, a poster you'll see in all of our offices around the world that says creativity is the only way to survive. And that for us is a distillation of what creativity is at its core, which is about solving problems for us, for our clients, for the world. And frankly, I think we've really lucked out today to get Pete with us. Pete is one of the highest profile marketers in the UK, I think, and really is also part of a leading light in what you might call a new generation of marketing leaders. He has been described that way by people far more eloquent than me. He is digitally highly engaged. He's very broad in terms of his capabilities and his experiences. And he's worked across a whole range of categories as well, from utilities to insurance to financial services. And at the start of this year, he took on the Chief Marketing Officer role at truly one of our iconic brands, Boots, 170 odd years old, and one of the UK's biggest and truly most iconic retail businesses. He takes responsibility in this role for the whole marketing ecosystem, brand, media, data, one of the most famous and biggest loyalty schemes in the country, the Boots Advantage card. And as I say, with a history going back nearly 200 years, there's a great responsibility for stewardship there that I'm certain is one of the reasons that Pete jumped at this opportunity. What he also did in that opportunity, by the way, is take a jump away from being a McCann client. While at TSB in his previous role, we worked pretty closely with him, doing some quite brave things, I would say, talk about creative courage, putting David Schwimmer, also known, of course, as Ross from Friends, in his first UK ad campaign. That wasn't an easy decision to make. And it's certainly something that Pete could look back and he left his mark on that business in all kinds of ways. So look, I think let's get into it. Pete wrote about that decision amongst many others in his career and some of the challenges of making great work through the pandemic in a brilliant piece that he called Holding Your Nerve. And that obviously is the connection to creative courage. Many of you, I'm sure, if not all of you, have read it by now. We're very lucky to have him. So Pete, thank you again. We're going to turn to Pete. You guys know how these sessions work. So we'll turn to Pete next for a sort of run through of his way of thinking, his philosophy, this piece he put together on Holding Your Nerve. And then we will have time, of course, for questions, both in the chat and in live action before we wrap up in sort of 50 minutes or so from now. So please add the questions. We'll follow them as we go. They can be about holidays, DJing, music tastes, radio stations, whatever it is. But it will all hang off the theme of creative courage. And Pete, thank you again for making the time for us today. It's really appreciated.
Brilliant. Thanks, Toby, and thanks for the intro, and thanks for having me on today. Welcome, everyone. It's quite therapeutic, actually, having to write the article, because there's a danger when people ask you to look at what makes great creative that you gloss over the stuff that was a bit crap, and it's all like, oh, this was amazing, it was wonderful. And actually, where I started the article was one campaign that I'm still embarrassed over, that we didn't quite get right. And so a few years back, my first brush with retail was being the CMO for the post office. And the post office is fantastic, fabulous sort of legacy brand. And we had a real opportunity to show the modern face of the business and how it was changing. And we did an amazing campaign, which was around Christmas time, that had Robert Webb in a new purpose-built brand new post office, unveiling what post office was doing at Christmas. And we had Pixie Locke came in, the butler from Downton Abbey was in it. It was a fantastic, star-studded, great campaign that worked well on all our brand metrics and also delivered for us commercially. It's brilliant. So the next brief that came in was great. So we're now launching the post office's first ever standalone financial services brand, Post Office Money. Great brief, amazing opportunity to do that in the high street, launch a new sub-brand. And so the gig was, okay, look, Robert Webb had worked so well for us at Christmas. We're going to bring him in and use him to develop a centerpiece for this brand new campaign, launching Post Office Money. And that's where things started to go a little bit wrong. And so the challenge in any big business like post office, can also happen in smaller businesses, is you've got a lot of stakeholders. When you come to financial services, you've got insurance, credit cards, mortgages, and ISAs and more. And those all represent different product managers, different divisions. And obviously you've got a very loud and vocal executive team. And where I think, went down a wrong turn with that campaign is not being firm enough on what was going to be in it. The brief was, we're launching Post Office Money, hooray, here's a few proof points. And it became, how many things can you ram into 30 seconds to say Post Office Money is here? And I think that's a danger with any creative vehicle is when you get to the proof points, unless you distill it down, you end up with a bit of a mess, a mishmash of lots of different things. And so my learning was we should have been firm. We should have been firmer on what was in and what was out, had more difficult conversations. But also I think when we were even down to storyboard and visuals, I think we'd sort of drunk our own Kool-Aid a little bit and thought, well, this looks great. It's going to work really well. And then you forget, really, it sounds like a stupid thing to forget, but you forget you've just got 30 seconds. And my challenge always, when I've looked at any bit of creative since, is, can we really do this in 30 seconds? Can we make it work in 30 seconds? Can you understand it in 30 seconds? Is it a bit rushed? Is it a bit round? So look, we weren't firm. We didn't deliver, I don't think, properly on what the campaign was there to do. And the ad, which is still on YouTube if you've got spare 30 seconds, is Robert Webb. And he has to talk so fast, it gives me a headache. And there's a moment when he literally springs out of a sofa at the end. It's like, and it's just like, it's like a verbal and visual assault on the senses as an ad campaign. Now, saying that, it kind of did all right, actually. It launched the sub-brand pretty well. The metrics were good. Your commercial performance was all right. But it's just not something I'm that proud of, because I wouldn't put it out there and say that campaign delivered on everything it was supposed to do. It wasn't clear enough, it wasn't concise enough, and it was a compromise. And I think the best creative ideas for me aren't a compromise. They're delivered faultlessly, brilliantly, and you have difficult conversations along the way to get there, and we failed to do that. So yeah,
I think
not our finest hour.
Oh, go on, Gav. You go.
We both jumped in there. Yeah. I think that's a scenario that I guess whatever side of the fence you sit on, creative or client, you recognise, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call will sympathise with that through and through. But one of my questions is how did you end up there? Did you kind of kick off with the brief being a very singular brief, and as time went by, things got added, or was it a complex one to start with?
Yeah, it was a complex brief to start with, and it's a great point, Gavin. It just wasn't, the brief wasn't tight enough from day one. It was too high level, and also we hadn't really landed all the proof points. It was a bit cart before horse. Sort of conceptually we're doing this. Here's some proof points, but more are coming later. And as more were coming, it sort of got added into the brief. So you end up with, well, mortgages want this, and credit cards want this, and And so that just compromised the integrity of the original brief as we went further along, because it just kept evolving and kept changing, rather than going, right, we have to really nail this down now.
And was it, I guess, at a point in your career, did you know at the time that it was the wrong thing to do? Or have you kind of subsequently learned that, or how did you kind of balance that emotionally around and kind of rationally around what is the right thing to do? If it is if it feels like the wrong thing to do, how do I deal with that? How did that kind of play out in your mind?
I think it's really two key learnings. The first of which is when you come off the back of a really good campaign, it fills you full of confidence. And my learning is don't be overconfident. And I think my view had been Christmas had done so well for us. We've got a similar vehicle. This is it's like rolling a six twice. We're going to do it again.
Yeah.
And what became really clear is that these were two very different briefs and two very different situations. So just because one had worked, actually the second isn't going to work in the same way. Also, Christmas we had 60 seconds to play with. So you had a longer format and actually 2 messages per ad as brand proof points, as opposed to 4 or 5 in 30 seconds. So no, I probably learned the hard way on that one. So lesson 1 is about as I say, being tight and not ramming it in, and secondly, just not being overly confident and taking a step back, pausing and going, okay, will lightning strike twice, or do we have to really think a lot harder about what we're doing on each? And I think it's particularly important when you've got a campaign that's a continuation of what you've done before. Each has to be better and has to build on and have a reason for being in its own right. It can't just be that's a rollover of the other one. And I think there's a danger sometimes of over-reliance on the public's appreciation for elements of the last campaign. So for example, in the Christmas ad, Robert Webb had a little sausage dog in the advert that was lovely. So the dog makes an appearance in the Post Office Money advert, but to fit him in, he had to be, I couldn't make it up. It was great, but he parachuted in from the ceiling onto a dog parachuting onto a bed. And that was fun to set that scene up. But we sort of relied too much on, the public's going to remember the dog from Christmas. And it wasn't necessarily that was the case. So hence it became quite busy with bringing bits in we thought had worked before. Lots of lessons there.
Good. Coral, did you
answered my question? No, mine was going to be around at what point you realised that it was going wrong. Was there a moment where you realised that actually this is going to not shape up to be everything I wanted? And is there a point of no return when you go, we can't change it all now, we're just going to have to run with it?
The realisation was quite late, Coral, actually, because if you imagine so you're faced with storyboards, and you look at the storyboards and go, visually this looks really interesting and dynamic, what's going on. And it wasn't just Robert bursting out of a sofa. Two people were having a tea and cake in a cafe, and his head pops up through the middle of the table, and there's a lot visually going on. It's really interesting. He was in a bed with a family, and then the dog arrived from the ceiling, and so that was visually interesting. And then even when we were filming it, you kind of go, look, actually this sort of feels all right. It was the reality of when you put it together into this edit where you go, holy cow, look, this is just like too much. So there were aspects on the shoot, but really it was the edit. And I think that my note to self was to challenge and ask a lot more questions sooner. I mean, it's interesting when we come and talk later on about the campaign with David Schwimmer. Actually, I sent to the McCann team, I sent them this Post Office Money ad and said, not that. Whatever we do, not that. Because we were wrestling with the same sort of stuff at TSB around messaging and approach, using a well-known face, having a time limit on the creative in terms of the length of the commercial, and just knowing that I'm never going to, please don't, wherever we go, it's not going to be that. The script needs room to breathe. We need to punch out the proof points. We need to also get the role of the talent really well landed, and make it hugely single-minded, which the Post Office Money campaign just wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a different. Obviously, the Christmas ad felt like it was more single-minded in the sense that it was a brand campaign, whereas what you described with the second one, it's much more you're trying to do product and you're trying to do lots of proof points and lots of benefits. And obviously, in the case of any sort of FS advertising, that's always going to be a big balance, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And you're right, not trying to treat it like, I know this is old school terminology, but a DR, a direct response TV ad. Be clear what the role of the creative is there to do. And make it single-minded.
Cool. Fab.
All right. So if I go on to the next story, which was around being prepared to be wrong. And this is a slightly older story, but my first marketing director job was working on a brand called More Than, which is a UK insurance brand, brilliant brand. It started off in 2001. Used to have a dog in the campaign called Lucky the dog, and it was That's More Than Lucky, quite an iconic campaign from back in the day. The slightly funny moment is when I arrived in More Than, the dog had died. Quite literally, the dog had died. So the dog had literally died in real life, and the dog as a campaign route had died as well. And we'd moved to Fallon, who were a great agency at the time, and they'd done some really good work for us. And we'd run a process where VCCP got the work. And so we were going, right, so we've had a few years of something different, and that worked quite well. We had a route with clever sort of 70s music and it's kind of disco iconography. It's hard to describe, but worked really well for us. And all of the research said, look, that's landing really well, your product proof points and benefits, but you're missing some of the humanity and warmth you had with Lucky. So VCCP developed a number of routes, and one of them was about bringing Lucky the dog back. And Lucky at that point, I mean, golly, that's 20 odd years ago now. Lucky had disappeared 15, 16 years ago. At the time, Lucky had only been gone 4 or 5 years. So we thought, okay, it's a route where Lucky comes back. And VCCP did a really nice route, which paired him with Rob Brydon, and they had a lot of interaction. And this was all about, this was great because it was single-minded. It was about a single-minded home insurance and single-minded car insurance, single proposition in the advert. But as part of the work, they developed what I thought was just blooming nuts route, where they found a guy on YouTube who did impressions of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Robert De Niro, and Morgan Freeman. And they played it and went, look, this guy does a brilliant Morgan Freeman, and we think we could make him a character called More Than Freeman. So we could fly him into the UK. He's never been to the UK before. He's a guy called Josh Robert Thompson. He's a brilliant, brilliant person, great guy. Fly him into the UK, get him to voice the campaign, be shown to be this separate character, More Than Freeman, and make it really iconic. And actually, I can say this now, but it was a bit of a homage to Shawshank Redemption. There's a lot of kind of narratives in that film, and the music was similar to it. So it was to evoke all the feelings of something quite iconic, quite human, quite relatable. So we went into research, and I was determined that Lucky was going to win, because Lucky felt like a safe bet. Bring back a much-loved brand icon that had done so well for the brand and business. I'd never had a chance to work with Lucky because Lucky was RIP. And I thought, look, what a great moment, as we're approaching the 10th birthday of this brand, to bring its hero character back and Rob Brydon together. And there's lovely chemistry in the script. Suffice to say, it absolutely bombed in the research, absolutely bombed. It was described as a really crap 70s sitcom. The humor misfired. People thought, what's Rob Brydon doing with his dog? Rob Brydon came across as a sad, lonely person, which I'm sure he isn't in real life. I'm not even sure Rob Brydon ever saw the scripts because of how badly it did in the research. And then I think we had one, actually, sorry, we had sorry, I forgot to mention the article. We had 2 other routes that went in. One was about like a pass it on route, where it was about people helping each other out. And there was one which was about someone mowing their neighbour's lawn. And I also thought, okay, that's quite interesting as a route. It's about caring and helpfulness, much more than it's about. That bombed in research. And I remember one guy saying, if my neighbour tried to cut my lawn, I'd go and punch him. And it's things like, actually, it was bits where you thought, oh, what a lovely gesture, where people like, if someone comes on my land, I'm going to go after them. And so it was really interesting going, okay, well, that's not working either. So then we came to the Freeman route, and people absolutely loved it. They loved it was a bit nuts. They loved that it was left field, and it really stood out. And they loved this association with Morgan Freeman, even though Morgan wasn't in the campaign. So my learning for this would be prepared to be wrong, be prepared as a client to go, okay, look, actually, there's something in this, and I'm happy to accept that I wasn't right on this first read, but there's something in this. And I just remember the mad panic, actually, after the final research group were going, flip me, people love this idea. Is Morgan Freeman going to let us do this? Because we'd have to pay to use his likeness, an association. And how the heck am I going to sell this idea into a conservative insurance company that is risk averse to go, I've just found this idea and we've got an impressionist who sounds like Morgan Freeman. So it was quite a sell into the business, quite a journey to go through, trying to track Morgan Freeman down. He was off doing a shoot somewhere, where he was hard to get hold of, and he wanted to see scripts and all sorts. He wanted to know about the corporate social responsibility policies and strategy of our business. It's an occasion where I was very happy to prove wrong. Very successful campaign, ran for several years, did huge, and we saw double-digit year-on-year growth in sales. Brand metrics went through the roof. And we were spending a fraction of what brands like Direct Line and Aviva were spending, but seeing comparable brand scores, we were spending at least half what they were spending, but the campaign has so much impact and momentum behind it because of its standout. So very happy.
It's so interesting when we were talking about it the other week to then go and rewatch it, because you've got it as a kind of memory to rewatch it and actually think in the context of this was an outsider idea that was kind of not favoured, but let's put it into research. I can't imagine what the conversations were as soon as you realised actually it's work, because there's a notion of putting it into research and then going, wow, it's worked really well, we need to get behind it. Being really honest, what was your gut reaction to get behind it, or was your gut reaction to go, not sure about the research, let's go with bringing back the dog?
There was so much. I mean, we'd done so much pre-work on all the scripts. It felt like if it was going to die, it was going to die, wasn't it? It was like we couldn't dig this thing out. There wasn't enough love there. It was a really hard moment of going. I mean, the good thing is I hadn't killed it internally. So I think if I'd been on a journey of going, got 3 ideas, there's one I'm just not sure about, but we're going to sort of chuck it in anyway, and which wasn't the plan. It was just like the 3 really strong ideas. One's a bit nuts though. It was then okay to go out to the business and go, look, this is the clear winner. And actually, research doesn't answer everything, but when you've got really strong read from research, it makes it much more compelling to sell an idea into business, because it's not just me saying this is great or so and so from the agency. Here's a bunch of real, customers and future customers going, we really love this idea. It was more the sort of panic of, because you're up against timeframes. You're doing the research at a point where you have to then go and make a campaign. If you don't make it, you haven't actually got an ad campaign. And because we've moved agencies, we didn't want to go back to our previous agency and say, if we ran late, to go, can we rerun the old stuff? Because that just defeats the object of what we were doing. It took a bit of eating of the humble pie to go, all right, okay, there's something in this, let's get behind it. It was more the worries of logistically, how the heck were we going to do this thing? Get this guy in the country, get Morgan Freeman's. Also, we didn't know how much it was going to cost for Morgan. So again, because it's 10 years ago, I can talk about it now. Morgan was paid $500,000 in the first year and $750,000 in the second year. And actually for doing nothing. So all he had to do was say, "We're very happy. I'm very happy for you to use my likeness." Not bad. He was also Morgan was brilliant to work with in terms of seeing the script, and in the second year of the campaign, we did get to meet him, which is a whole other story. But he was very engaging, very good, and very clued up on the campaign, which is great.
Wow. What I liked about that particular story, I think, is that it shows that, or I think for me reading it as an agency person, we all have those kind of really crazy ideas when we're at idea stage that sometimes we think are too far to put in front of the client, and maybe they'll never go anywhere. Is it worth putting that in front of the client? And what it does show, it suggests that you had real kind of faith in your agency to put it into research in the first place, which is obviously really good to see. But it also encourages all the agency folk on this call that sometimes those kind of crazy off the wall ideas that you think are never even going to get past ideas stage, sometimes they're the ones that get through, and they're the most memorable. And I mean, Gav will remember an idea that we put in front of First Director years ago, which was based on the Samuel L. Jackson look. Do you remember? It was based on that look that he gives in Pulp Fiction, where it's that kind of like, are you crazy look? And we built an entire idea around that eyebrow raise, and then did it with an owl. So, and that could have absolutely died, but it was a brilliant campaign and really performed really well. But it probably only got off the ground because we had it in a really informal discussion, like tissue session with the client, and all got really excited about it. And I think that's what's so nice about having good client and agency relationships, is the ability to encourage craziness, encourage and brave ideas, which is obviously what we're trying to kind of foster with Creative Courage, that kind of absolute faith in your agency and the weirdness that we sometimes come up with.
No, that's really good to hear. And it matters so much as a client to see the full stretch, the breadth of ideas that you bring forwards. And I just think creatively, look, as consumers, we want to be entertained and we want to be challenged, I think, through the creative we're seeing. And I think if I look at some of my favorite ideas over the last decade, if I look at things like Cadbury's Gorilla campaign, which was amazing. Even Direct Line, Harvey Keitel, who'd have thought that the guy from Pulp Fiction sells you car insurance? I mean, you just, if you presented it as that, a guy from this, Quentin Tarantino movie is going to pop up at your house and in your car and talk to you about, insurance, you'd go, what? But actually, I think it's where great creative meets great brands, and shows why we as brands need great creative and need great agencies to push our thinking and challenge us, and to push and stretch our brands further. It's so important.
Yeah, even the one that jumps out for me always, that I think I can't really work out how it got through, is that the squidgy is at the EDF squidgy kind of
Oh,
orange
yes,
thing that just goes across the screen. And that, whilst you as soon as it came on, as much as it irritated you, you kind of knew exactly what it was. And I have a little boy, and my little boy would like bounce around to it. So it's like that type of advertising that's weird ideas just do wonders sometimes, don't they?
Yeah, that makes a big difference. Yeah. The fun bit with the Freeman shoot as well, actually, was that the first year we did it, not only do we have all the challenges we talked about, but it was blooming cold in the UK, and it was and it snowed. And so we finished shooting in Brighton, and then it snowed overnight, and the whole crew was stuck there for the next day and a bit. But thankfully, we'd finished filming. If we'd filmed a day later, we would have been unable to film. I mean, we had a lucky escape then, but it was blooming cold. And we stuck this guy, Josh, pretending to be this character, Morgan Freeman, on top of a roof on a wire, and it was chucking it down with rain. And poor guy had been to UK before, and he was half frozen to death really by the time we finished. So the year afterwards, we filmed in Cape Town. So
nice, very nice.
Like, not doing that again. So yeah, much warmer.
It's nice to see everybody putting in the comments previous campaigns that they also have sold crazy ideas. So Fran, Gav's wife, Will It Flush, the Yorkshire Water campaign. That was
yes,
a fun
nice.
one. Yeah.
There's going to be some excellent YouTube searching happening after this. There'll be some audience spikes for the post office money campaign. That's for sure.
I think.
Please come and like it. You'll be the first people to do it.
I think it's great, Pete. Actually, there's a story there that you just kind of be prepared for the unexpected as well, and kind of adapt with it and roll with it. And ultimately, I guess if we all know where we're going to be, and when we get a brief and kind of we all know what the answer is going to be, life would be pretty dull then, wouldn't it? In terms of I think we should somehow kind of be prepared and keep our ears close to the ground for those little things that change the direction of something for the better, and kind of follow it through. And I think it's reassuring to hear a client kind of take that on, going into some research thinking it's definitely that idea, and coming out going, no, it's that one. How true to what we saw on screen was what went into research for the Morgan Freeman idea?
It was actually pretty much exactly what we took in, actually. There were little touches, like he wore a yellow suit in the end. There's bits that we didn't have in the research, little details. And just things like I think we had some of the scripts were less developed. There's one where the Brighton one where he's actually, again, we had him on a wire on top of a pavilion. You have to see it to understand it. And that wasn't in the original work. We just focused on the wheel. In fact, one of my favorite ads is the shot of the wheel on a Citroen, which is just beautifully filmed again through the streets of Brighton. That was in there. Actually, the pet ad is very different. There's a pet insurance advert that's also on YouTube. So we did a home, a motor, and a pet one. And the cat, there were two cats, and both cats got terrified. So the ad's filmed, it works fine, but the cat was supposed to follow a shoelace along the screen, and something spooked both cats. Both cats on the day were totally freaked out. So it ends up being the cat, and then it's cut away to a shot of some boots with some laces. Again, you have to see it. That was very different, and it's fine. It works well, but a lot less engaging because on the day the cats did not perform.
Wow.
Not something you expect to hear on every conversation.
That's a good punchline, that, isn't it? The cats didn't perform.
Well, and obviously you have a backup cat, don't you? Have like a courtesy cat. You have a backup cat, and the cat, neither cat was in the mood that day. It was like, no.
I guess that's why CGI exists now, isn't it?
It is, exactly. That's right. So you take the cat on the adventure it didn't want to go on. So yeah
exactly. No, that's great. That's a really good story. Yeah. Love it.
Well, it kind of leads nicely onto the McCann related one about TSB and championing great work. And I know pretty much everybody on this call, we will have all had our own stories through the last year, through the pandemic, of what we can and can't do, and some of the frustrations and challenges that's come for us both personally and professionally. And the TSB one was a particular set of stories where we'd done a lot of work through 2019 on the TSB brand, and we were moving away from local banking for Britain to a new brand platform that at the time was life well spent. And we'd moved the business to McCann, who developed some fantastic creative. We had looked at a number of potential talent to front the campaign. I felt if we're going to do something different, having talent that could bring the idea to life would give us a real boost, particularly because TSB is a challenger bank. Our budgets are not as high as the big players, the Lloyds and NatWest and Barclays and so on. So we really, again, needed something to punch above its weight, to have a campaign that was positively talked about, shared and liked, and was also engaging and quite different for the brand. And the old work had been great for TSB, if you remember the animation, the whistling, but it started to become a little bit tired, was seen as a little bit for an older audience, and wasn't engaging, a cross section of the population that we needed to, and certainly wasn't positioning TSB as modern and new. I think particularly because with local banking for Britain, it felt like we were talking about the high street and about physical presence in banking as opposed to our digital offering as well. So a lot of that needed changing. So we went into 2020 probably overly confident with sort of, right, we're going to land the right talent. We've got some great scripts. We've got this end line positioning around life well spent. And gradually bits sort of kind of didn't go our way. And so it started with a competitor bank developing a campaign that had an end line, which was life better spent. And so you go, right, okay, so if they're better spent, we can't launch being well spent because better's better than well. And it just, you go, look, there's just something in this that doesn't feel right to go ahead and do that. So McCann did a brilliant job responding quickly when we came back with Life Made More, which captured the essence of what we were trying to say, which was that if people feel confident with their money, they're confident in how they can lead their lives and can get on and live their lives. And at the heart of the work for TSB is, I think there's a lot of work in banking that's in danger of describing the category. So if I look at a lot of banking ads over recent years, sort of, we've got a great app that can help you manage your money. And a lot that's about, we're helping you prosper, thrive, we're with you, we're by your side, and look, all those are lovely thoughts, but for me, there's a lot where the sector's getting quite similar now, where we're sort of, we could end up describing each other. And we end up describing the category, what the category does, rather than, well, what are you doing as an individual financial services brand that's different? And our real focus was around helping people lead more confident lives by getting on top of their money. So taking the advice and help beyond just, selling you a current account into actually, how can we help with your money to go further to help you fulfill your ambitions in life, and tangibly doing that rather than just saying that, which when we researched it was really different for a bank. So we're changing our brand platform line. That was challenge number one. And then we were due to film in May last year. And as we reached March, it became abundantly clear that was just not looking possible. First of all, because all production shut down on everything, including TV and advertising, as we know. And also just the scenario was challenging. We at that point settled on David Schwimmer, which I can cover in a second how we were going to get him in the country. And also the scenarios were pre-COVID. So there was one setup where he was at a wedding. There's a problem. He was in a coffee shop, restaurant. There's a problem. And so each of the situations, there's one where I think he was in a barbecue in someone's garden. So we had scenarios that just suddenly, things that we could do that we took for granted, suddenly you couldn't do, couldn't get our talent in the country, had to change our end line, and we couldn't film anything. So you reach March and you go, oh crap, what are we actually going to do? And so the challenge about championing the great work is keeping that alive through this period, where we then produced, as many brands did, some ads filmed on camera equipment. McCann did a brilliant job in people's homes. We had TSB colleagues. Those ads actually did really well for us across 2 or 3 months last summer. And through that time, though, we kept the idea alive of, right, so David Schwimmer's really keen. He's been working on some scripts for us. He's going to be in the country in October. He's filming Intelligence. So we got a date right. He's in the country. Scripts are taking shape. How do we just keep this thing alive and keep this thing moving? And I think the biggest breakthrough was a conversation that Cheryl at McCann and I had a moment when we both had this realization that it was coming together, but we couldn't film what we'd originally intended to film because the parameters had changed. And it was quite a liberating moment to go, right, we all know the idea is right. It's researched out so well. And just give everyone on this call comfort. This is the most research campaign I've ever worked on. I mean, you're talking like 6 or more rounds of research, refining. We could not have researched this thing more in terms of sentiment, mood of the nation, how people feel about the talent, the messaging, every blooming scene, the storyboard. This was so researched within an inch of its life deliberately to make sure it worked really well. But there was a realization that we couldn't go and film weddings or cafes or things that still felt like, because we didn't know where we were going to be in December, January when we launched, we didn't want to do anything that felt like this is just completely at odds with where the country's at. So the McCann team came back brilliantly with okay, so if we can't have David in these different situations. David could be traveling around. So if he was in a camper van and he's going through the UK and interacting with people, we can film that in a socially distanced way that works. So, he's never up close with people, many shots he's in the van, but capture the spirit of the fact he's bringing to life Made More, because he's interacting in a way with people where the core product, unique proof points and benefits of TSB are brought to life, like repayment holidays on loans and rounding up the pennies to save as you go with TSB as well. And so that idea went back into research, performed really, really well. And that was helpful because at that point, we're going through a lot of debate really as a business going, well, because there's so much uncertainty over COVID, are we going to be able to launch this in the right time frame? Should we stick with this idea? Do we need to do something else? Do we keep filming ads in people's homes? Where are we going to be? So the kind of champion great work bit was for me and the team with McCann to keep the idea alive, to keep showing momentum, show the research, show the findings, give confidence in the business. And this went right up to the board. This went senior leadership team, excuse me, exec board to get sign off. So the research, the gating for this, the stage gating of each stage was so important, and showing that and delivering the confidence at each point when we signed off, signing off the contract with David, signing off the budget as it came up to the shoot itself. I have to say though, I've never been more nervous though leading into a shoot with the fact you've got COVID surrounding you, and you worry, when you've got talent in the country, you've got things to do, you're worried, what happens if David falls ill? What if other people on the shoot fall ill? What do we do? And the amount of scenario planning was massive. But no, look, end result, I'm still super proud of. At the point I left the business, it had beaten every single brand metric for any campaign we'd ever done before. And sales were at a record high point at that moment. So the campaign absolutely had been delivering at what we'd wanted to at that point within the business. And David had just worked brilliantly well, and he was a delight to work with. And if we get more time, I can share more David stories, but I'm happy to open to questions from you, Gav. And
I guess, ultimately, it's a really nice kind of full circle back to holding your nerve. And I guess we all recognise the longer time passes, the more effort it takes to hold our nerves. So I guess that's a phenomenal effort to go from over so many months through a global pandemic to kind of to hold your nerve with that. I did. I guess was there any doubt on the overall idea, and how did you kind of defend that doubt? Because obviously there was a responding to COVID. Was there a doubt around the idea of being right for the brand within that period?
No, interesting that the platform was never in doubt. So there's no question over Life Made More to go. And actually all the research we saw was that, and it's even true now, people are desperate. We're all desperate, aren't we, to get out of lockdown and look forwards. And actually what we saw in all the research leading up to the launch, which was on Boxing Day last year, was that people were looking for more optimistic messaging and looking for messaging and creative that pointed forward, that didn't remind them that we're in this sort of pseudo lockdown situation, and reminder of the year we've gone. It was all about looking forward. And actually, that really helped when we're launching a campaign going into the new year. Now, clearly the bit we hadn't counted on was all ending up in national lockdown again in the new year. And so there was sort of discussions leading up to it, but the hope had been we'd be coming out of lockdown. I think we'd all hoped that into the new year. So there were conversations as we approached January to go, okay, so the campaign's launched. We now found ourselves in a national lockdown. We moved out of the tier system. Should we change any aspect of the campaign? And actually, again, we did more research, which showed that no, it was right to keep going. There was just one thing we changed. And so there's one advert with David in, which is a 30-second current account advert. And we changed the start of it completely because we'd recorded so many different edits. But the original edit was to start with, "Who doesn't love a day out?" was his opening line. And then it goes into some of the rest of the work. And look, I with the team made the call again, look, when you can't really leave your home, to start with a line, "Who doesn't love a day out?" just feels like it's just not sensitive to the situation. So the line changed to be far more about keeping on top of your money, which the brand ad had in it as well. So it's just subtle changes, adapting to where the situation was with people. But no, it was about holding our nerve, believing the research was fundamentally true. And there'd been no, I saw him, certainly my time when we launched it, no pushback on, this is out of tune with the nation, and how dare you be trying to be uplifting or have humor in an ad. People really enjoyed the sense of something uplifting and looking forwards, and it seemed to tap into the mood of the nation through this period.
It was nice to read in your article as well that you left a certain bit of room for ad-libbing as well with kind of David and you know, I guess there's always a balance, isn't there? You kind of choose a talent because you love that talent, and then you write a very prescriptive script for them that doesn't allow that talent to be that talent. It was nice. I know we talked earlier about unexpected things happening, that kind of going into research, but actually allowing a bit of space for unexpected moments to come through with the script. How was that, and how did you kind of manage that? Because obviously you can't get that signed off going into it, but and how did you kind of manage that with the team?
It was scary and exciting in equal measure. I mean, David is so good at ad-libbing, and because we got so many reads, there was, let's say, so that we weren't crazy in the sense that we got the read that was in the script, so we knew we'd get it in the hands. You know, well, if the worst happens, I've got this. But actually, it was so brilliant seeing him in free flow really with what he could do. And so my favorite ad actually is the Loans one, where he changes the tire on a car and he goes, "I've changed the wrong tire." Yeah, and actually that wasn't in there originally, but on the day you go, this is just so funny. And when you can see around you people on set laughing because it's just brilliant to see it filmed, let alone on air.
Yeah.
And actually, interesting with that scene, originally the Loans ad was going to be start as a 40 and get cut down to a 30. We actually changed the airtime to be just 40s because losing that scene just made the ad less good. So you go, no, actually we're going to stay with 40s because that scene is so key, because his ad libs were so good. There's so much on the cutting room floor I wish people could see, because even just little looks and gestures of things he does, he's brilliant. Yeah, and as a director himself and a writer, he knows what makes good work. And just to show how invested he was, after each take, he'd come up to me and the guys would gather around him onto going, "Look, was that good? Do you want me to do it any other ways, any other reads you want?" And the final chat I had with him before he left his final day on set was, "You know, Pete, whatever you need, if you want me to come back, do stuff, do re-record, anything you need, I want to make sure you're really happy, and this is the very best work possible."
Oh, that's amazing.
He was a really lovely person, a human being, but just so professional to work with. It mattered to him that this worked. And that was so good when you work with talent like that.
I guess one of my questions was going to be, did you ever regret choosing that talent? And clearly you've answered that. I'm sure there's been moments in there'll be people on this call now going, "Yeah, really regret using that talent." Is there any, without naming names, have you ever regretted using talent before?
No, I've been lucky actually, and I think just as comfort, we did joke about this before previously, Gab, didn't we? That I've ended up talking about 3 ads that involve celebrities. I've done lots of ads that haven't, so I'm working on some work with Boots at the moment, which I'm not planning to have a celebrity in, and so everyone I've worked with has been really good actually in different ways. People are different than what you expect. Robert Webb, for example, was more introspective and thoughtful than I thought. I thought he'd be a bit more, hey, and actually he's more reflective than you thought he was. Lovely to work with, though. Yeah, Morgan, as I say, that his interactions were great. David is brilliant. David is what you see is what you get. He's a real family guy as well. But the David you see on TV, you know, and he's a lot more than Ross at Friends. But you can see how much of himself is in Ross in Friends when you see him in action. And he is just naturally funny and fun to be around. You get a sense of just a laugh. It's great.
Yeah, I guess that's an added dimension, thinking what will talent bring extra to this script, and kind of allowing space for that. Having, you know, I'm sure there are horror stories about, you know, I'll only wash my hands in kind of spring water, and, you know, and my trailer needs to be 4 times bigger than anyone else's. And I'm sure that still goes on, but there must be a kind of art to getting not only the talent right for the brand, but actually the performance out of the talent as well.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a nice story about David as well. So look, I came up with an idea with the McCann team, and we talked to David about it, and he loved it. And so what we did is, on the first day of the shoot, we got a photo taken of him with a camper van. And he then, we had enough copies printed, he then signed an autograph one for every single person involved in the shoot that they were given. And for all the members of my team involved in the campaign who were unable to attend the shoot because of COVID, which was significant, you're talking about 15 plus people, he personally wrote and personalized every single photograph with a personal message to each and every one of them that we sent to them. So that's the kind of person he is, that he was quite up for doing that. And he wanted to personalize each picture for those that have been involved in the campaign directly in shaping it. yeah, I could wax lyrical about how lovely David Schwimmer is. Just a really genuinely great human being.
I think that feels like another webinar in and of itself.
We've got some questions as well, so we probably need to jump on to asking the question. Bear in mind we have 9 minutes left now, so
I'll answer quickly.
Yeah, if you do have any questions, please do post them either in the chat or the Q&A. The first one, in fact, let's go with the second one because it flows on from what this is. Have you ever created a making of commercial? You know, so I guess using all your outtakes, a making of commercial content series.
Yeah, we did one actually for the campaign with David Schwimmer. We had someone on set and did that. You can see it on the TSB feed on YouTube. We've got a few of the outtakes and bits in there. I think those things work really well. I've done it previously in my More Than days. I really like making of films. I think they can be really good. Also, just for an internal audience. I mean, we made that TSB one more for colleagues, but we decided, look, it's really good. Let's put it out externally as well. It really helps, I think, particularly to get colleagues to buy into an idea to go, here's how we set up, here's how we've done it, here's what we've done. When you're selling in particularly a new route, when you're replacing a previous campaign, it can work really well. So yes, big fan of making ofs.
Can work really well for lots of purposes, can't it? You mentioned the stakeholder management piece. There's also the you never really know what you're getting into. So there's building on the story. You know, is there something, you never know when you're going to need something that you left on the cutting room floor. And if that platform has longevity, you touched on some of this earlier, you know, to have assets that you can use for multiple purposes, particularly now in different channels, it's a great way to maximize the impact of the work you're making.
Agree. Key thing is keeping them fun and engaging. If they become a bit corporate and dull, for me, it's always like, think about the audience that, you know, people aren't going to listen to, people don't want to watch me for 10 minutes waxing on about a campaign. They'd rather have David Schwimmer on. So it's sort of, let's make sure we focus on the bits that are really engaging and interesting, that are going to really get people to connect with the campaign. And what's great actually in the making of the TSB one is we had the creative team from, you know, again, from McCann. So it was able to showcase the people behind the scenes who'd made the magic happen, which was great.
Yeah, that is great. There's a slightly more technical question or a sort of more pointed one. And it's a bit of a request for some guidance and help, really. It's about the differences between creative that works in the B2B audience space and in B2C. And the specific question, you've obviously touched both, Pete, and continue to. How can I train my creative team to deliver content that's optimized for B2B? The notion of training creatives is one thing. You can see that Gavin's laughing on the other side of his face on that one, but there you go.
I think it's about, in the brief, is being clear that you're up for some, I know it's a cliche, out of the box thinking, but going, look, in response to this brief, you know, actually, I want you to really push yourselves and what you come up with. And there are lots of examples of I'm going to struggle to remember them now, I know, which is helpful, but there's examples of really great B2B campaigns that can act as stimulus that show that, you know, you can have a bit of fun and be really creative and engaging with the B2B audience. Often we forget that some of the main decision makers in businesses, particularly SMEs, are consumers like you and I. Yeah. And some B2B stuff can be incredibly dry when actually we want to, we want to be entertained, we want to be engaged, don't we? So actually, there's room to really cut through in B2B more than ever, particularly key given you've got smaller budgets. So no, I just dial up in the max in your brief that you're up for some really bold, creative thinking that's really going to push and challenge you.
I think that's really interesting, Pete, in terms of, you know, we're all human beings and we're kind of emotionally driven as well as rationally driven. I guess in a way, don't treat them as a very, very different audience. They're still human beings. It's just slightly different need states. So I think that's really interesting, just to not worry too much about the word business and almost kind of just think of them as an audience. Are there any, I guess, from the outset about holding your nerve, are there any things you've really learned on the way? And I guess one key one that sticks out to my mind would be pushing back stakeholders and kind of keeping true to the vision of something. And, you know, have you I guess adding to that, have you learned techniques to do that, or what other things have you learned through your career about?
I probably, Gav, learned the hard way a little bit. Is I think always plan out your route to getting work signed off, even from the early genesis of an idea. Who needs to sign off? Who do you need to talk to? And what are the stages through the journey to engage and get people's thoughts and views on stuff? the danger is if you leave it too late and then you haven't involved the right people in it, the wheels can start to come off at those moments. And also, yeah, you're right. Who could derail you? You know, it's you know, who's going to be difficult to deal with? Where could the problems be? So one of the things I've always done when I've presented creative at board level is go, right, so who do I need to get on side in the room before the meeting? What prep do I need to do beforehand? Who do I need to brief beforehand before, you know, we open it up to a wider sort of topic or conversation? Because then you've got allies in the room going, well, I'm really up for this because I've seen it already. Actually, I'm count me in type thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is that stakeholder management, and also, you know, thinking through what angles might people have. And what's interesting, you know, most senior leaders, including board members, have particular favorite topics, you know, of things they will gravitate to and go, right, okay, so this person's really going to challenge me over customer experience or social media or data. So if in this context of this bit of work, how am I going to answer that? How am I going to cover that? As I say all along, having really strong foundations of research and, you know, really having that prepared and what's the strategic thing ahead, you know, have a really clear, tight narrative doesn't half help. You know, and then I think it's knowing, well, you know, that kind of where you will compromise when you're presenting work. What are you prepared to compromise over, and what aren't you prepared to compromise over? You know, so actually, one of the early conversations about the TSB campaign was around how strong the branding needed to be. So as a result, we have a TSB bank shown in the background of one ad. We've got the TSB logo on an app. That was a conscious discussion in an exec meeting where we went, okay, look, actually, we can do this in a way that doesn't compromise the work. And we built on, you know, we kind of yes-anded the work. When yes-anded, we can do that. But there are other aspects where, you know, one of the questions was, well, can we feature more of a interesting business-to-business slant? You know, and you go, well, we just can't. You can't add that in and go, well, that's going to work as well. That has to be something different. So we're very clear on, okay, that can work, but we're not going to compromise over here. And actually, it's interesting back to the post office learnings of going, let's be single-minded here. The campaign's going to do this. It can't, you know, relaunch the brand, talk about current accounts, and say when also we do B2B. That's a whole other ad campaign. So yeah, let's not compromise on what we're trying to do.
You seem to have a really strong kind of respect and focus on research as well. And I think obviously it's really important. But I think my question to you that I'm really interested in with your new role is, how much more research are you doing right now because of how things have changed, and what are you expecting to change when everything opens back up again?
Yeah, so same sort of level in my new job at Boots as we were doing at TSB, the constant drumbeat of tuning into the mood of the nation, consumer sentiment, and particularly as a retailer, how are people feeling about, you know, non-essential retail reopening, shopping habits? Is more in depth in that area than the TSB work would have been. So I think listening is more important than ever, and it's going to continue to be important because we've got a timetable from the government, haven't we? But we're all aware that things could evolve or change. We don't know when we're going to be able to go abroad on holiday. We don't all yet know probably what our summer plans are going to look like. So that constant need to keep listening is really key. So I think, Coral, it's going to be an evolving picture. We're going to need, I think, collectively to keep evolving our approach, listening and following the insight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got one final, but it's a really interesting question as well. Darren is asking, have you ever ignored what the research has told you, which is an example of courage? So you talked earlier about the Cadbury's gorilla, and that bombed in research, didn't it, famously?
It did. Yeah, I have done it a couple of times. Give you one example in more than the campaign before the Freeman one was the one I described with the disco music and stuff. We put that through research, and it's first time ever I've only put one idea into research. It absolutely died on its backside. Absolutely. And I was like, no, this works really good. So actually we went away, pulled apart the approach we'd taken into research, reshaped it and put it back in, and it flew. So we hadn't got the approach quite right. We hadn't shared the work quite in the right way. And so, yes, I've ignored the research, but saying that, I did then put it back into research to validate it. I know if I'd taken that on face value, we wouldn't have done that campaign. It was hugely successful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I think there's a big difference, isn't there, between using research to make decisions and using research to inform your decision making.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. That's been a theme through a lot of what you've said today, as well as the importance of the brief, like getting back to fundamentals. The brief. You said at one point the brief has got to be brief, right? The clue is in the name. If you're trying to do 27 things in 30 seconds, 25 things in 30 seconds, chances are something's going to be dropped somewhere. Right, I think we're bang up against time, but we could honestly go on for hours. I think it is down to me to say a very grateful thank you, Pete. It's been fascinating speaking to you and hearing your voice. Gav, Coral, I know you feel the same, and we've had 80 odd people join us today, so thanks to all of them as well. But Pete, they are all here for you. If it was just us talking amongst ourselves, I'm sure the numbers would be different. But seriously, thank you, and of course, wish you all the best in the you're still relatively new, but as you keep getting your feet under the table, we'll look for your impact on some of the work we see from Boots coming forward as well. So all the best with everything there.
Fantastic. Watch this space. Thank you, guys. Been a great session. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Pete, and thanks for everyone joining.
Thanks
Absolutely.
all. Take care. All the best.
Good day, everyone.
Yeah,
the wave. There you go.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone. Bye.